Okay, so let's continue on with our unit circle questions, putting it all together, 5.2, 5.3 into 5.4. So this question right here asks or tells you that the sign ratio in quadrant 2, so they were very nice to tell us what location, is 1/2. So again, you always draw it. So this is theta. Now we don't know what theta is. It didn't tell us theta, but it did tell us that y/r is 1 on top of a 2, right? So opposite over hypotenuse, y/r, 1/2. Sketch the angle in standard position. Done. I already did that. And determine alpha and theta. Okay. So it wants us to figure out what those amounts are. Now, if you didn't recognize these numbers, you would then pick up your calculator and you would go 1 divided by 2, inverse sine, and you would get 30 degrees. However, hopefully by now you recognize these numbers from your special triangles. They're not random numbers. This side is root 3 down here. So remember, next to the root 3 in the 30-60 triangle is the 30 degrees. So in any case, we get the 30 degree is our alpha. But to get theta in quadrant 2, remember that you have to go 180 minus your alpha, which is 180 minus 30. So this particular case, theta must be 150 degrees. Okay, so we figured out the angle based on our special triangles and recognizing those sides. But even if you didn't recognize the sides, you could just inverse and get the 30 degrees that way. Okay, now these are the same things. However, they weren't nice enough to give us the specific quadrant. So here they were nice enough and told us it was in quadrant 2. Here they're not telling us what specific quadrant is in. We have to find all possible angles of theta if theta lies between 0 and 360. So, and notice these are just random numbers. They're not nice fractions, so these aren't special triangle questions. These are calculator questions. Because again, you can just tell that's just a random number, random number, random number. So the first thing you always do is you draw it. So we're going to draw where cos is negative. Now, cos is negative where the x-axis is negative. So cos is negative here, but he's also negative here. And it didn't tell us which one of these two locations it is. So what we need to do is we need to figure out this theta, and we also need to figure out this theta. So we have two answers that can work here because we don't know. Now, what we do, though, to find our alpha, remember, is we inverse of, in this case, cos out of 0.8722. And you get 29.3 degrees, approximately. So theta in quadrant 2 and theta in quadrant 3. So now we use this 29 degrees, realizing that this is 29 and this is 29, to get both our answers. So here we're going to be 180 minus 29, and here we're going to be 180 plus 29. So 180 minus 29 is 51 degrees. So 151. And 180 plus 29 is 209. And that makes sense for this location. Okay, so again, you were just inversing, getting our alpha, realizing what location we're in, and how to use that in order to figure out the rest of our answers. If you're given cosecant, secant, or cotangent, remember that we don't deal with this. If we flip this, we have to flip this side as well. So secant comes from cos. So if I flip that, that means I flip this one. 1 divided by 2.076843. So 1 divided by 2.076843. Or you could have used that x to the minus 1 key like I mentioned before. So this is really asking us for cos of 0.481500, for instance. We inverse, and we get an alpha of 61.2 degrees. Now, where could this possibly be? Again, it was a positive ratio. So where is cos positive? Well, cos is positive in the first quadrant and in the fourth quadrant. So if this is 61.2 degrees, this is 61.2 degrees. So theta in quadrant 1 is itself, but theta in quadrant 4 is going to be 360 minus 61.2, which is, what is that, 360 minus 61.2, 298.8. Too many numbers today. And that will give me my two possible answers. So again, when you're given cosecant, secant, or cotangent, flip this, also flip the number, and then you inverse, get your alpha, and then use your locations. Where is tan positive? Tan is positive where slope is positive. Right there. So we're positive here in the first quadrant and in the third quadrant. And again, we're going to inverse whatever that 2.3151. So inverse the tan, 66.6 degrees. And again, that's what the calculator is giving us, 66.6. This is 66.6. And you can see opposite angle theorem, right? So we have theta in quadrant 1 is itself, is your alpha. Theta in quadrant 3, though, is going to be 180 plus alpha, 246.6 degrees, which makes sense, again, based on our location. All right, so that's what you do when you see random numbers and you have to figure out theta based on your alpha and your location. So the last page here is just reminding you about that cast rule. If you don't want to think about the axis systems, which I suggest you do, positive axis means positive x-axis means cos is positive here and here. Negative x-axis means cos is negative here and here. Positive y-axis means sine is positive here and here, so 2 and 3. Negative y-axis means sine is negative down here and down here. Tan is slope. Tan is positive in 1 and 3. Tan is negative in 2 and 4 because that line has a negative slope. Otherwise, C-A-S-T. Cos is positive, all are positive, sine is positive, tan is positive, if you'd like to memorize. All right, so when you're given a random or exact, so in these cases, you have to look at the question to see, how do I know these numbers from the special triangles, or are these just some random decimals, or in this case, fractions that have nothing to do with the 30, 45, 60 triangle? So you're going to see both cases here. You're going to have to determine theta, but it doesn't tell us location, so we're again going to have to do both options because cos is negative in 2 places, sine is negative in 2 places. So because it's not being specific, we have to do it twice. And of course, like always, you start with a diagram. Always, always, always in trig, you start with a diagram. So cos, where is cos negative? So we just said where the x-axis is negative. So here and here. Now, this isn't a decimal. These are sides. So we have 3 and we have a 5. So this is the 3, this is the 5. So if I was to draw my triangles, it would be like this. And it didn't tell me quadrant, so I don't know which one it's referring to. But there's the negative 3. Now, I don't care about the y value because I'm not writing sine and tan fractions. But I do need to figure out alpha, and I do need to figure out theta. So this is, again, where I inverse. Alpha is going to be the inverse of whatever 3 divided by 5 is, pulling out the cos. So we got 0.6, inverse cos, 53 degrees. Now we'll keep the 1.1 degrees. So theta in quadrant 2 would be 180 minus the 53.1, and theta in quadrant 3 would be the 180 plus the 53.1. And again, you're showing your work as to how you got your answer. So 126.9 makes sense for the second quadrant. More than 90, less than 180. And then the third quadrant, more than 180, less than 270. 233.1. So these were just random numbers that they gave us, so we had to use a calculator. Now in this case, I've seen the root 3 before and I've seen the 2 before, so I know that this is probably not going to be a random calculator question. This is going to be one of those special triangle questions. Where is sine negative? Well, sine is negative down here because the y-axis is negative, and he's negative over there because the y-axis is negative. So there's one triangle, there's the other triangle. Opposite root 3, opposite root 3, just happens to be negative. Hypotenuse 2, hypotenuse 2. So you've seen this triangle before, so you don't go root 3 divided by 2 inverse sine like we did over here, because you should recognize this is your 30-60 triangle. And close to the root 3 is the 30. So we know that the 30 is here. This must be the 60 corner. And again, because the root 3 is here, this is the 30. This must be the 60 corner, because this is the 1 and this is the 1 side. So it's that 30-60 degree triangle flipped upside down. But that's now going to tell you that your alpha is 60 degrees. You didn't have to do any calculator work. We recognize this triangle from those special triangles. And that helps us now with theta in quadrant 3, which is going to be 180 plus 60, better known as 240. And our theta in quadrant 4 is going to be 360 minus 60, right? Minus our alpha, which gives us 300 degrees. So we figured out what those thetas must be given both scenarios. Now the last type of question again that you're going to see, we already saw it in 5.2, but I'm just going over another one, is how do you now fill in exact value expressions and work it out? So very important that you give this one a try. Each one is going to require its own little picture. So sine 300. So again, work ahead of me and then come back and check. Sine 300, what does that look like? Well, we have to draw it. 300 is located over here. So if this is 300 degrees, it means this must be the 60. So if that's the 60 side, that's the 1, that's the root 3, negative, because it's down there, and that's the 2. So sine is opposite y over r, negative root 3 over 2. So we just got the exact value for sine 300, drawing it out first, filling in the numbers. Repeat, cos 210. Draw out 210 degrees. Puts me in the third quadrant. Which means inside here, past 180, I've gone 30 degrees. So this must be the root 3. This must be the 1, and of course that's the 2. The root 3 happens to be negative, the 1 happens to be negative. So cos of 210 is adjacent over hypotenuse, negative root 3 over 2. All right, cot 315, and happens to be negative 315 degrees. So really that's saying 1 over tan of negative 315. So we got to figure out our tan answer. Now 315 is down here, but it's saying negative 315. So negative 315, if you start down and then you rotate, you're actually going to end up in the first quadrant. So that's negative 315. And that means you've left 45 degrees till you close up your triangle. So that's a 1, 1, and a root 2. So tan of 45, or negative 315, is 1. 1 over 1 is 1. So just a 1 there. And cosecant negative 270. Negative 270 is positive 90. So this is where we're ending up at one of those cutoffs. And we need to go know our coordinates. So we got 0 and we got 1. 0 and 1. So cosecant is really asking us to flip our answer to sine. And in this case, 90. Sine of 90 is 1. The reciprocal to that is 1. So all of this just to come up with 1. When we work this out, multiply before you add and subtract. Negative times negative is positive. So we got root 9 over 4 minus 4 over 4 all over 1. So we got 3/4 minus 4/4. I don't have to write the divided by 1. This is -1/4. All right, so hopefully that solidifies a lot of what we've now been doing in 5.2, 5.3, and 5.4. I realize it is a lot of new information, but you just have to do a bunch of different questions yourself, go back to the notes, verify, and then keep trying new ones. Let me know if you have any questions though. All right?